I had tied my identity into who was showing up. When you find your identity in people showing up and then no one's there, that's when I felt really exposed. You don't see many conference speakers that have small churches. And typically what you celebrate, you get more of. And I felt the Lord say, John, it's not how many, it's what kind. I feel like pastors, we will skip the soul foundational work in order to grow. I am all for growing, but what I feel like I caution church planners with is the higher you go, the deeper your foundation's got to be. I mean, every question, how many people got? And not that we don't want to count. There's a whole book of the Bible called Numbers. So I'm not against counting, but I had never thought of like, how is our church blueprinted and structured to actually make disciples of Jesus? My life passion is how do we make disciples in the Western church while not also losing the way people have handles on church?
Welcome back to the ChurchCandy podcast. Today, I'm sitting down with my friend, Pastor John Ware, all the way from Virginia. And you're going to notice that we're both wearing NFL jerseys, even though his is like a baseball jersey.
Yeah. Yes.
What's funny, in the studio, I have a Tank that you guys can't see in the camera.
Yes.
That Tank Dell jersey is like a baseball style jersey that I definitely ordered from China. And
Timu.
Yes, basically. But yeah, with football season around the corner, you are a Jags fan. I'm a Texans fan. AFC South rivalry.
Yes.
And question for you, how did you become a Jags fan? Because you're from
Great question. Yeah.
Up in the Virginia area where you guys planted, right?
So I was raised a Dallas fan.
Okay.
And so actually I was almost named Dallas. My dad is such a big Cowboys fan. He almost named me Dallas.
Which
it
is
was
crazy,
John or Dallas.
Because as a Texans fan, like the two teams you hate the most are the Cowboys and the Jaguars.
I'm a closet Dallas. They're my second to honor my dad.
Okay, got it.
And then I named my third son Dallas because just to honor my dad because he didn't name me. So I was like, you know what, we're gonna honor him. So back in '96 when the Jaguars made that playoff run, Mark Brunell, they beat the Bills. So the second year as a franchise, they beat the Bills in the playoffs. They beat the John Elway's Broncos in the playoffs. And I was watching it and I was tired of being a Dallas fan. I was like, I got to create my own identity.
And so how old were you at this
13,
point? Yeah.
13 years old. And I said, I'm going to be a Jaguars fan. And most worst decision I've ever made in my life, trauma, pain, horrible relationship. But I'm committed. I always say, if you want to find a committed person in a relationship, find a Jaguars fan because he's going to be faithful and true through the tough.
That's so true, man. That's so true. So we decided to both wear our team's jerseys with football season coming up and just to show some unity,
man.
Yeah, unity in our country. That's what we're going to be talking about. Kind of, sort of, not really. But man, excited to have you chat. Yeah, you guys planted Lifehouse back in 2017. Man, so share that story. What was it like planting Lifehouse?
Man, those were the pre-COVID days. Those were the good old days.
Pre-COVID.
No, but I had always, when I had gotten saved, I had always started things. And so when I first got saved when I was 16, I started a Bible study, started a school assembly program, started, on campus things when I was a youth pastor. And so kind of didn't even know that I could start a church. And then when I found that out in my early 20s, I kind of always felt that at some point I would do that. And so kind of some life circumstances happened in 2015 that kind of made it clear, hey, it's time. And so kind of God ordained like a relationship back when I was like 18, 19 years old, kind of just brought that relationship back together and really just a lot of puzzle pieces fit and just really felt like it was the right time.
Yeah, so you were doing full-time ministry already?
I was a youth pastor. Yeah, I was a youth pastor for 10 years.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to youth pastors out there that feel like God's calling them to plant a church? But really quick, before we jump into that, pastors, I'm going to ask you a question. Can your church handle more new guests? If that answer is yes, then I want to tell you about ChurchCandy. See, at ChurchCandy, we help churches get more new guests on Sundays by running their Facebook and Instagram ads, inviting their city to church. We are on a mission to connect 1 million people to a local church, and so far, we have already connected over 250,000 people to churches all across the country, and we would love to send people to your church as well. Imagine all the people that drive by your church every single day that want to grow in their relationship with the Lord, that want to be plugged into a life-giving church community, but they have no idea that your church exists. We want to get them connected to your ministry. So go to churchcandy.com or hit the link below in the description. I'll also pin it in the very first comment so you can schedule a call with the Church Candy team, learn more, and see if we would be a good fit to work together. Now, back to the podcast.
I would say make sure you're running to something instead of from something. Because I think most youth pastors, they can have the desire to, well, I don't want to do that. They might be in a church under a lead pastor and they're like, I don't like the way he does this or the way he preaches or the way they structure things. And so I would say, just make sure you've got a vision and call from the Lord and you're running to something instead of from something. I didn't realize how much of a chip on my shoulder that I had. I think, a couple things. One is being a person who stutters. That like I had always felt like I was second tier, second best. And planning a church will expose what's inside of you. That's what I don't think I realized, how much planning a church is a personal journey as well. Because when you step into a position of leadership like that, the pressure will expose you, the good and the bad. It'll expose your gifts and it'll expose your weaknesses. And mine, I had deep insecurity that I didn't realize how much it was driving me and how much I was leading from it. So I remember getting in a set. So, kind of whenever you're planting, you go through the assessment process. And there was one particular organization who I'll remain nameless, who gave me an assessment, and they wrote out a whole report, and they said, candidate Ware will probably plant an average size church. And so I remember going and looking up what the average size church was in the United States, and it was like 90 people. And I was like, I got you.
So now I have a
I'll
baseline.
show you average. And I just think, unfortunately, that put an unhealthy, I already had a chip on my shoulder, and that even put a bigger fuel in the fire, probably like a Tom Brady chip. Like, I will show all y'all.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to be average. And I hadn't really dealt with that. And I kind of, and God will use it, right? He did. He was kind, loving, patient, and all of that. But that's what I'm saying. It's like, I just feel like you have to do soul work. I didn't realize how much I was just trying to just be successful so I could feel successful. Right. And unfortunately, I think in some ways I used the church for that, and God was kind and patient and has redeemed that and in many ways healed that. But I don't think I realized how much whenever you start off, you've got to make sure you have a call from the Lord, and it's not just you're running from something, and you just make sure that you're deeply aware of what's going on inside of you and that it's pure.
Do you feel like you were tying up your identity with the success of the
Oh
church?
God, yeah. Ain't no doubt. And really, that's where in 2020, right? So I mean, God was good. First day, we had 450 people there, right? Like, we worked hard, built a launch team, worked the ARC model, and had a lot of people there. But I don't think my soul was ready to lead something that large, right? And but I'm sorry, what was the question? I want to make sure I'm
Yeah,
answering
just
that.
like if your identity was.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So once COVID hit, right? So we had our largest attended Sunday, literally the Sunday before COVID hit, right? So when people, when you find your identity in people showing up, the amount of people showing up, and then the next Sunday no one's there, and you're learning to preach to a camera, right? And then that's when I felt really exposed, because I'm a guy who stutters. I do a lot better when I'm with when I am with somebody learning to preach to a camera. Literally, it was hell. I felt exposed, and I got so much stress in my body during that time. I couldn't even, like, in my neck and shoulder, I couldn't even turn my head to the left. Like, it was so bad. But that's one thing that the Lord exposed. It was like I had tied my identity into who was showing up in the success that I was having. And and that's where but I'm actually very, very grateful for that, because that's what actually led me down a process of soul health and getting help for my soul, because I didn't realize how much I was leading from a deficit.
You think it's pretty common for pastors to tie up their identity with how big their church is?
I think I think it's hard not to, especially what we celebrate in the West for church, for what success is. You don't see many conference speakers that have small churches. You don't see many conference speakers that are um, that are really faithful in a small context. That are faithful in a rural context or in an inner city context. You don't see those propped up, and typically, what you celebrate, you get more of. And I think, unfortunately, what the stream of church planning that I was in, that's what you see as successful. That's what you see as getting attention. That's what you see. And so, of course, I think inside of you, that's in a way discipleship. It's like you're being discipled to think this is what success is. And so I think it's hard to not. And then too, you even sprinkle in uh, personality, right? Where I'm a driven person, right? Like if I wasn't doing church, I would probably doing something business, right? So it's like you sprinkle in the personality side of it, then I think that's where it can really get dangerous. If and it was dangerous. I don't think I realized, during COVID how close I was to being a statistic, and being another one of the whatever percentage of pastors that burn out or do something dumb. But it was really there where the Lord met me.
It's kind of
You know?
Francis Chan's whole thing, right? You remember he had that big church,
Yeah,
and it was one of the things where like people celebrated the numbers, and he kind of got convicted
yeah.
of that. And so for you, what was the journey like really trying to reset your soul?
So I think I did what every pastor does when they're looking for help. They go on Google.
Well,
And
now it's
so
ChatGPT in
now it's Chat
2025.
GPT, but back then it was Google. I knew I needed something. I didn't know what I needed. I was like books, podcasts. I tried that. So I just went online and typed in pastors retreat, and found a ministry in California called Soul Shepherding, led by Bill and Christy Gaultier. And they were therapists, personal disciples of Dallas Willard, and they had worked in church environments from a church plant and a mega church. And so I was like, I don't know these people. They have retreats in California. I'm going to go out and try it. I was really concerned that it was going to be like a bunch of dudes in a circle crying with an acoustic guitar around a fire, writing sins down. And, I was like, what am I going to get myself into? Um, and I mean, it's a long story, but to make a long story short, I went out to a retreat July 2020 in California that really sparked a 4 to 5 year journey of just realizing I have a soul, right? Like I don't think I really realized like Jesus's words whenever he said you could gain the world and lose your soul. And I think I always preach that as like gain the world of like mansions and Bentleys and all of this, but it was like my world was success in the church world, and how like I just thought of how like I can gain the world, my world, and in that process lose my soul, lose my relationship with God. So I feel like soul shepherding, even inherent in the name, is helping you realize you just don't have a soul, you are a soul. And the freshness of what you bring, the ministry you do, is going to flow from either a contaminated soul or a healthy soul. And what they do is they help pastors shepherd their souls, right? And kind of also too, I feel what it did for me is soul shepherding helped me experience things that I would preach. Because I feel like one of the occupational hazards in ministry is we consistently preach about things that we've never experienced, right? So we can have God's with me, and we preach that. He will never leave you nor forsake you, but we feel alone, right? And it's like because we can take a text and break it down and get resources and put them together and share it and preach it and contextualize it, that doesn't equate experience. And that's one thing I feel soul shepherding is it gave me the tools to take, because I even think Jesus, right? It says the word became flesh. So a word, a concept became embodied. And I'm like, even that is discipleship, is just not just having a concept or having doctrine about God, but having experience with God, and it gave me tools and teaching and resources to help me actually like God is really with me, and then for someone who is consistently aware and deeply insecure and very aware of my inadequacies, what it did is it made me so much more aware of God's presence than my than my um than my weaknesses. right? So it's, just kind of one example, right? It teaches triangle living of it's not just me and Brady right here talking. It's me, the Spirit of God, and Brady talking. So it's like just that thought of just like knowing the Spirit of God's here. It's like I don't have to carry, I don't have to bear the weight the Spirit of God's here. So just knowing the Spirit, I don't know. It's just like for me
Yeah.
that was revelatory because I felt so much pressure when I would go in somewhere to carry it. And I think most lead pastors do. We feel the weight, right? To have to carry our staff and carry those in the church and carry the weight of the
'Cause
ministry.
they're depending on you.
You're right. They're depending. So it's like, I don't think Jesus taught, don't feel the weight, but even Jesus modeled that. He said, I do what my Father tells me to do. I say what my Father tells me to say. I go where my Father tells me to go. It was like he was literally living in light of just what his Father told him to do. So it gave him a peace. It gave him a security. It gave him, I mean, I just don't know how Jesus did it, going into all these systems of people. Pharisees, religious people, sinners, his disciples, right? Hurting people, and he was able to go in and not compromise himself. He was able to go in and be secure in his Father's secure. You are my son, whom I love, and I'm very well pleased, right? He had his identity secure. He didn't need anything from people. So he was able to go and give instead of like, well, I need their approval. I need that, it's like he was able just to go in and just be holistically him, empowered by the Holy Spirit, living in his Father's love. And then he could, and it's like that kind of stuff that I wasn't taught that. I was just taught how to do ministry and how to grow. And I'm all for growth. That's why we got ChurchCandy. You know what I'm saying? Like I am all for growing, but what I feel like I caution church planners with is you want to just in architecture in general, what do they teach? The higher you go, the deeper your foundation's got to be. And I feel like pastors, we will skip the soul foundational work in order to grow. And then what ends up happening is we have a soul that can't handle the weight of what we're leading, and that's why I think if you're striving to grow in numbers, praise God, but also there's got to be a soul work that's being done to make sure that you're ministering and operating from a healthy place and that you can handle the weight of what you're carrying and what you're leading.
Yeah, so good, man.
Sorry, I just talked for like 90 minutes. I don't even know how
No,
long
that's
that
good. That's great.
that was.
So every single year, over 3,000 pastors quit full-time ministry. And I saw another stat that over 30% of pastors in the last year have seriously considered quitting full-time ministry. Why do you think that is?
I relate with that, because like I said, I feel like in 2020, I was very close to being a pastoral stat, and and really, as I look back on it, it wasn't because I didn't have passion. It wasn't because I didn't have call. It wasn't because I don't think I even I had skill. Like I feel like I could build, but I literally felt like I mean, kind of like I just said, I didn't realize how much your soul matters. And when I say a soul, to me, and this could be theologically wrong. I know some people think differently about this, but you're like really the soul is all the parts of you integrated. Your mind, your body, spirit, all of these things. So your soul, because like when you ask someone, how's your soul? It's something deeper than just like, how's your day going?
It's like, oh, it's good, I think.
Right. I mean, and I think there's a reason for that, because when we say, how is your soul? It's literally like we're asking, how is the sum total of who you are as a human being doing?
Yeah.
And it takes time, right? It takes time to be like, how's my mind, my spirit, my heart, And I just think pastors, they, because that isn't celebrated in church culture, is the pastor's doing work on it. He's doing work on. I mean, just think, Jesus spent 30 years preparing to do 3 years of ministry. That alone, right? Because it's like we will do 3 years of prep and then expect to do 30 years of ministry in a healthy way. And if Jesus, right? Like even say, what would I do differently? Like as a church planner, I'd go slower. Right. I would, I would pray more. I'd learn more spirit. It's like, I would literally try to go deeper in my soul, but it's like, it's so hard because that's not celebrated. It's not, no one's gonna be like, man, I'm glad my pastor has a healthy soul.
Yeah.
And so it's going to take some counter formation. It's going to go against against the grain, but I think Jesus is the model for that,
Yeah.
of how he took 30 years and prepped, and then he was able to have 3 years of crazy impactful world changing ministry that we're still feeling the effects of now.
Yeah, it's a little counterculture. I've seen memes about pastors going on sabbatical, and it's like, well, I don't get to take a whole month off of my accountant job because it's
Yeah.
tough, right? You see things
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
But there's obviously a lot more weight that's carried
That's
in
what I
that
would say.
journey.
Anyone that says that is like, please come and do what I do for a year. Please. Well, I mean, honestly, if you would like to come and do that, please come and do that. And not, but Jesus even modeled that. He said Jesus often got away. Right. I remember once one scholar even said he believes 1/3 of the 3 years Jesus was doing public ministry, like a year of that was him spent away. And so I don't know if that's true, but just when it says Jesus often got away, I think there was a reason for that, because he needed to reconnect with his source. you know
Yeah. It's not uncommon for pastors to be so focused on the church
mm,
that they might not have a moral failure or an affair,
mm,
but in their marriage, it almost feels like the church is the other woman. You know what I
hmm
mean? Um, how has this relationship with your family changed over the past few years
Such a great question.
since you've dug deeper with your soul and keeping that healthy?
Well, that's what like I feel like a healthy soul will impact everything, because it's like I didn't realize how many years in ministry I dragged my wife. I mean, and we joke about it now, but one of the things that soul shepherding is big on is empathy, and they teach that as oxygen for the soul. Basically, because like I didn't realize what my wife really wanted from me for 12 years was empathy. She didn't want, because like she would always joke and she would say, "Stop pastoring me," right? Because she would like, yeah, because I would get into counseling mode, I'd get into cheerleading mode, I would get into scripture versing mode, I would get into all of these things that I would normally do as a pastor with her, when what she was longing for was a place to breathe, a place not to be fixed, right? And that's one, because I didn't realize I couldn't give it because I hadn't received it from God. And I mean, you even think what Jesus did when he became incarnate is he empathized with us, right? That's what
Literally.
what Hebrews 4, right? It says, since you have a great high priest, um, Jesus, come on, since you have a great high priest, uh, what is oh, let us, I'm sorry, I can, essentially it says, let us, since you have a great high priest who empathized with us, right? One who took on flesh, became like us. And then it says, let us then approach the throne of grace to help us in our time of need. Why can we be safe and comfortable going to him when we have needs? Because he knows what it's like to be us, right? He entered our world. And so I think with my wife, it definitely affected that, because I stopped trying to fix, and I stopped say, how can I be a safe place for her to breathe? Right. And so it definitely affected that. It affected the way I lead my staff. I mean, because I felt like I was, what are you doing? Because that's where I was like, because I felt like God was like, what are you doing for me? So I led out of a, what are you doing? I didn't know how to shepherd them, didn't know how to really lead them well. And so I felt like what it did, is it gave me the ability to be a safe place for those around me, because I had experienced the safe place with God. Because it's hard to give what you don't have. It's hard to give what you've never experienced, right? And so just even being a dad, just all it trickled down, right? But like I couldn't give it because I had never received it. And so I kind of felt like soul shepherding gave me the tools to be like, because I felt like through soul shepherding, right? I knew about the divinity of Christ, but I had never been equated with his humanity. And I feel like depending on what stream of Christianity you're in, right? Some people might be like, they're very equated with the divinity. They got the doctrine, they got the, they got the divinity and the doctrine side, but they're lapse on the humanity side. And that means they'll be a little more harder on the doctrine and a little less on empathy and grace. But then you got those that are really big on grace and empathy and the humanity, but don't know the divinity. And you need both. If you're going to lead and you're going to be genuinely you, I think you got to know the divinity, know his lordship, but also too, it's like if you don't get in touch with your humanity. That's what that self-awareness has been such a major tool that I just, because like to me, it's hard to change what you're not aware of. And I didn't realize how many things I was leading of that were unconscious, right? And I feel like soul shepherding gave me the tools to like be aware of my soul, the landscape of my soul, so I could give to Jesus things that because like Jesus can't be Lord of places you're not even aware of. You have to be aware of it.
What's one of the most practical tools that you took from soul shepherding that's really helped you?
So I told you about the triangle living, right? Um, Another thing they're big on is they say walking in Jesus's easy yoke, right? So we know the teaching Matthew 11 where Jesus, come unto me all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And yoke is teaching that was rabbinical language for take my way of life and take my teaching on you. And so, but even, yoke, that was a farming term because it was basically saying you would have a seasoned ox that would yoke itself, that would be connected to a younger, unseasoned ox. And the older seasoned ox would then guide and lead the younger, unseasoned ox that didn't know how to plow. And so what Jesus was doing there, he was saying, I'm inviting you to yoke yourself to me. I'm the seasoned one. I can lead this thing. That's why he says, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. So he was essentially saying, when you yoke yourself to me, it's not that your life is going to be easier, but it can be an easier way to live a hard life because you are not bearing all the weight and all the responsibility of it. You are simply yoking yourself to me and following me. And I just think for me, I had switched it. I had asked Jesus to, like, I was trying to lead Jesus. Because I was like, I'm the, but it was really unconscious because I think in the West, lead pastors feel so much pressure to be everything. The answer man, the marketer, the CEO, the therapist, the CEO, leader, HR expert, all of these things, right? And it's like we feel that pressure to be everything. And it's like it was just a subtle shift of, instead of me and asking Jesus to bless what I'm doing, and then I'm feeling all of this weight, it was just like, I'm just going to yoke myself to him. He's the best. He's the best leader, right? He's the one that ultimately changes lives anyway. And it was like that's good in thought, but then practices, right? Practices are what kind of bridge that gap. So then I learned about breath prayers, where it's just like breathing centers you. Spiritual direction. I had always tried counseling and always thought it was awkward. Spiritual direction changed my life. Just having someone there listening to me, prayerfully, not trying to fix me, asking me more questions and giving me more answers. That was really a life-changing discipline for me to engage in that. Because I didn't realize what I needed more of wasn't just more answers from somebody. It was actually a space to breathe and talk and process and detangle stuff that I was walking through. And I felt like that, that gave me clarity. So, I mean, that's kind of a couple things there.
So throughout this process, you come back and you start living this out.
Mm.
How has that been with your staff and your team at the church? Have they taken on some of this? Has that changed the dynamic or the relationship?
It changed like we went into a revisioning process with our church. For real. I was like, because in January 2021, I felt we were in a time of prayer and fasting, and I felt the Lord say, John, it's not how many, it's what kind. Right? Because I mean, my every question, how many people got, how many, right? And not that we don't want to count. There's a book, a whole book of the Bible called Numbers, Acts. So I'm not against counting, but I had never thought of like, how is our church blueprinted and structured to actually make disciples of Jesus? Jesus said, go into all the world and make disciples. And I feel like I had missed that. It was like, I just wanted to build a big church, and not that having a big church is bad, but it was basically like, and I felt the Lord, you're going to enter a season of revisioning and of not just being, centering around how many, but what kind, so really, and I felt like tied into that was, we are going to be a center of discipleship, which is what the church was ultimately called to do, and so then we have to say, how are we going to work that into a Western church environment? So a book that I would recommend, can I recommend books?
Yeah,
Is that okay?
100%.
Okay. A book called Future Church
Yeah.
by Will Mancini. That was a life-changing book for me because I feel like it gave me handles on how to have permission to set an atmosphere of discipleship in the church while not losing the Western church and the way it does it. Right. Because I'm like, the way people have church in the West, they services on Sunday, like they have a way that they've been discipled to kind of have church. And so so what the book talks about is every church needs a lower room and an upper room. Right. And it says the lower room is essentially kind of that people make emotional decisions based on 4 P's, that kind of how they make a church home, that the church has been built on in the West for whatever many years, right? The first P is place. Well, it's right by my house. Or in our context, it's at a Regal theater, right? Oh, I love church in a theater, right? Or the personality of the pastor. So I love John. He's a stuttering pastor, dude. I love him, right? Or, the people, right? They're like, I've got friends that go there. Or the fourth P is programs. So they're like, man, it's really, really cool that they have good youth ministry. And because you see, he's like, that's the lower room of a church. He said every church needs a good lower room, right? So he's not bashing that, but he says every church needs that. But it's like, if that's all you have, then that's where it could get into. People are at your church for 2 years and they've experienced all you have, and the highest they can go is being a greeter leader. You know what I'm saying? Like it's basically like just trying to create more lower room and get people active, and not that that's bad, but so what he says is every church needs an upper room, that what he calls is the disciple making vision of the church. So how is your church intentionally being blueprinted to actually make disciples? And that gave me language. Like I feel like we have a good lower room. I'm a lower room guy, right? Like I love thinking through all that, but I was like, I don't know what our disciple making vision is. And then I felt like what sparked that was what kind. And so we've been wrestling with and trying things about how do we become a church that literally is in a center of discipleship, like a discipleship training center, while also knowing the context of where we do ministry is in the Western church, and so that's been really interesting. But I feel like that is my life passion, is how do we make disciples in the Western church environment while not also losing the way people have handles on church.
That's so good, man.
Yeah.
And something I love about Lifehouse, you guys are extremely diverse, which I feel like in America, saying you have a diverse church a lot of the times is like typically all white. And then like one of our female worship leaders is married to a black guy, or like the youth pastor's wife's Mexican, which my wife is Hispanic. So that was not the case at our church.
Yeah.
Being in Houston, like very
Houston's
high.
so diverse. This
Yes.
is my first time here. And
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, this is a diverse place.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I
Yeah.
love you guys really like live that out, like diversity in your church.
Mm.
And so tell me a little bit about that, and like what advice would you give to church planters that like feel called to have a diverse church, some practical things?
Yeah. So I think a couple practical things. One, it's got to be authentic, right? If you aren't diverse, don't expect your church to be, right? So I had a little cheat code in this, right? So the church that I grew up in, Bethel Temple in Hampton, it was the first church in our area that back in the early 80s said, we are going to intentionally be diverse. And they got the pastor, who was a white guy, got hammered. I mean, just say he's just running a. It was this really mean thing.
You don't need to drop the slurs.
I'm not going to drop the slurs. I was like, I don't want to bleep that out. But just mean,
Yeah.
right? And so I'm grateful that my heritage, my spiritual, like I don't know anything different. I just don't, right? Like, and then even Hampton and Newport News, racially, it's 50-50. And I mean, or it's like even 60-40 black, right? So we are in a diverse area, right? I mean, just right down the road from where I grew up, Allen Iverson went to high school. Michael Vick went to high school, right? So we are in a very diverse area. And so growing up, I didn't have any white friends, right? I liked rap and basketball. And so it's just like all my friends were black, right? Or black, Asian, you know what I'm saying? So it was like, I didn't know anything different, my spiritual heritage, but then even the place I grew up in. And so when we started a church, I couldn't do anything that wasn't diverse, right? But that's who I am, right? So I think number one, it can't be ingenuine. It's got to be authentic, right? Like, and it's got to be led by you. Secondly, it's got to be intentional. You know what I'm saying? And intentional doesn't just mean like you said, finding the only black person that can't sing, and then just putting them up there to make sure, hey, we've got representation, you know.
Yeah.
But I think it does have to be intentional. So like you have to think like, because dude, I think we forget what it's like to go somewhere and feel like the outsider, right? So even when I was here in Houston, I went to 3 churches in 12 hours because I just wanted to feel like what it was like to be a first time guest again in a church, right? And I just think if you're struggling with diversity, and you're a white person, go to an all black church and see how that feels, you know. And then or if you're a black person, no, it's just like go and see what it feels like, because it's not gonna like it's not gonna just slide into being diverse. You're gonna have to be intentional. You're gonna have to say, you know what, is our worship music accessible, right? Is those that speak from the platform, do they see representation, right? And you don't want to compromise, but you want to be intentional. And so I feel like we've done that, you know. But also too, I think it's got to be authentic to you. I can't imagine nothing else, you know. So for me, it's like this is who we are. This is who I am, and it's because I think who you're going to reproduce who you are, not who you pretend to be.
Yeah, I've heard it said that you're going to attract who you are.
Yeah.
Do you think there's truth in that?
Absolutely, you know. Yeah, and but too, I think you also need to give yourself grace, you know, and realize like, it's okay. Like it's okay if you attract, you know what I'm saying? It's like, let's not judge what the Lord's doing, you know, but if you have a desire in your heart, if you're like, I feel like the Lord is calling me to this, then I think like with anything, you know, cause you might know black people, but do you really know them? Right. Cause like, even when you see Paul, like he said, I became like, so I could reach, right? And so I think you can have a concept of people with no context, right? And so you're like, yeah, I have black, like even when 2020, right? When stuff went, I will consider myself a very diverse person. Like I got black friends, like I know what's going on. But then as stuff was going on and I was starting to talk to them, I was like, wow, yeah, I don't think I really understood some things, you know? And so even for me, I would have considered myself a very diverse person, but I also realized I hadn't really gotten to know what life has been like from their perspective. And so I think that would be important. If you have a call and a heart to say we want to be intentionally diverse, I think the authentic thing to do would not just be to try and go in like, but actually put yourself there, just as Jesus did, right? He became incarnate. Go and put yourself in places of people that aren't like you, and really say, what are they experiencing, right? Because you can have a concept, like I said, a concept, but no context. And I think getting that context really helps you to be like, huh, yeah, I had a concept of how they were and what things are like, but then I've actually gone and lived it. So
What was it like pastoring such a diverse church during things like the 2020 like racial tension that we had in
yeah,
America?
I felt like I was in the middle. You know, like honestly, I felt like I felt like Stretch Armstrong, you know, on both arms. Where I feel like white people, I'm like, hey y'all, like we've got to listen here, right? It's like we've got to listen. We can't just point fingers and say, well, you ever been, you know? It's just like I felt like I was trying to pull them together, right? Because I know there was anger and just sadness and grief, you know, with black people and what they were walking through, and when what they saw with George Floyd, because they just didn't see somebody, they saw their kids, or they saw their relatives, they saw, you know. And so and then you know, and so I felt like I was literally trying to be like, y'all, what we do as Christians is we don't point fingers. We come together and we talk and we chat, just like in the very early church. They had that they felt like were debatable matters, and they had to come together and talk and chat and walk it out and talk it out. And that's why, you know, it's like be quick to listen and slow to speak. And, you know, we had people on both sides leave. because they've like, well, you should have spoke up and you should have said this and and it was like, I think every pastor took L's. And I think when you look back, yeah, there's some things that I would do differently, but I also think like we did the best we could I did the best that I could to try to keep together what the Lord had brought together. And, but I would just say, I think even acknowledging your own biases, but then not just like what you think, but why you think it. Right. That's what I think pastors don't do a very good job of, is actually dissecting not just what you believe but why do you believe it? How has life shaped you to believe something, and wanting to make sure that that is not a bias of why you won't be open to hearing something else. Right. So I don't know.
Yeah, it reminds me of like my son always asking why. Well, why? Well, why? Well, why? Anytime like it just has to dig deeper. It's like I don't know why it rains, dude. Like it just does.
Ask Chat GPT.
Right?
Yeah.
And so today you guys have two campuses now, Newport News and Hampton.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. How did that happen?
So we launched Hampton in March 2000. Well, so the Hampton campus, we adopted a church. So we adopted a church that was in Hampton. They met on Saturday nights, and a good friend of mine, we had been on staff together at a previous church, and we had started talking in September of last year. What would it look like for us to come together? And kind of the conversations led there, and we just felt like it was God. We were better together. And so we brought them into the Lifehouse family as Lifehouse Hampton, and they meet on Saturday nights at 6:30. So, for us, I had always desired to have a Saturday night service, because I'm like, that's when I would go to church. If I wasn't a pastor, me and my house, we'd be going on Saturday nights, because I love the idea. The kids are already up. You can go to church, go out to eat afterwards. And then on Sundays, man, you have a whole Sabbath day, to chill, hang out. And so that was very attractive to me. And I just think so. But it really was a God thing of like, hey, and then too, they were desiring to be a part of something bigger as well, because they weren't a part of a network, a denomination, or anything. So for them, they were able to kind of find family as well. So that's kind of how that happened.
And do you guys see any pushback with Saturday night services with like college football season, or just having?
Well, we've never, since we started in March, right? We haven't encountered that.
So we'll see what August and
happens.
September
But,
looks like.
One of the things about Newport, it's so diverse. You know what I'm saying? Like, and it's transient. It's one of the most frustrating things about being in Newport News, Hampton, or in the 757 is what we call it, because 85% of the economy is federal, right? So you've got Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, NASA, government contractors, Newport News Shipbuilding that employs 30,000 people, that builds nuclear submarines. And it's just so much transiency. And you get people into your church, they're awesome, they're good, and they're like, we're out in 2 years, bro. So you always feel the fluctuation. But at the same time, we I just feel like with anything, man, like if God's called you to do it, push through. And our Saturday nights, they're not crazy huge, but it's definitely hitting a particular section of people that desire to come to church on Saturdays. We've had people come and they're like, we have been praying for this. Like this one couple, they started coming to March. He was like, I work on Sundays. We've been praying for a church to be on Saturday nights. We've been looking for community. And so thank you for starting this. And so it's like, we know there's a group of people out there that desire that. And so we feel it really fits with the vision of giving people options, especially in a very transient area, area. So it's kind of, for us, it fit.
And this campus meets in another church's building, rents it out.
West Hampton Baptist Church.
Yeah. So what's it like doing church in someone else's building?
It's a really great setup, and really too, for us, we've been portable since day one. So we are portable at this church, and we're portable at Regal Theater as well. And so, there's portable problems and permanent problems, right? Everyone's like, well, when are you going to get a permanent building? I'm like, okay, right now, 7% of our budget goes towards meeting space total. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's really nice.
Yeah.
That empowers you to get more staff. And then too, everyone finds you online. Like, I don't know about you, I'm really not paying attention to what is around me when I drive. Right.
Yeah.
So it's not like, well, definitely a permanent building has got its benefits. Right. But I think for us, everything is online. I'm like, that's why we use ChurchCandy, because it's like that is because like the digital, like that's where people find stuff.
Yeah.
People don't go like, well, I saw that church over there the other day. I mean, a couple people might do that, but most people are like, they find you online, the way they find restaurants, the way they date, the way they do everything. So for us, the location, like to me, the easiest thing we do is have church. We do something 2 times per year, church at the park. One of our most favorite, people love it, man. There's this park we have, Newport News Park. We go up there, set up, stage. I mean, it is amazing. And I'm like, we just pick up church since we're portable. We go out and do it. And so for me, like our strategy right now is like the place we gather. To me, gathering is the easiest thing. The hard thing is making disciples. The hard thing is getting people to be shaped and formed to be like Jesus. So for me, the gathering piece is like, we'll use another church. We'll use Regal Theater, like, because to me, man, I'm like, that's the easiest thing the church does is gather.
Well, now you have an opportunity to vent about it. Let's talk about the problems. What are some of the big issues you see with portable church loading in and loading out?
We have a really good setup with both. So it is I know there's a cost. There is a personnel cost, right? So the thing we have with Regal is we have all of our stuff on site. So we have a theater that's broken that they allow us to keep all of our stuff in. So
that's nice.
It takes us in the mornings 35, 40 minutes.
So you're not getting there at like 5:30 a.m. like some
the
other
production
churches might.
team's getting there at 6:30.
Okay.
Right. So but it's like everyone else, the setup team is there at 7:30.
Yeah.
Like 7:30, so but it's because we have a good setup. Also, too, something we did is the 4th weekend of the month, we do something called At the Table, which is we have church in homes. So it's sort of an intentional break that we put in there to give our serve teams and to give our setup and teardown team a breather. And so that has been, and it's like, I feel like we did that not so we could grow. We literally did that because we know we need a breather one time per month. And but then also too, having the opportunity to have church in homes, people that can't go to small groups, people, what I'm saying? It's like, and we got people in our church that have owned that and they love it. And they, because like what we do is they have food, fellowship, it's potluck style. We pre-recorded the sermon. They watch the sermon together. They process it. They have questions. They pray together. And so I feel like I'm going to be in this for the long haul. If the Lord calls us to be portable for a long time. That we have got in place, intentional breathers, and but no, I mean, it is frustrating, no doubt. I feel like every Sunday the theater's breathing down our neck. We love you, Regal. Is breathing down our neck to get out, a movie starting. We've had times where the kids ministry theaters, they've had like the previews come on, so they got to come in the hallways. You know what I'm saying? Like it's definitely frustrating. But we as far as the setup and teardown environment that I've seen, we have it as good as you could possibly get.
Have you guys put any effort in looking at some permanent locations?
Of course,
yeah.
we're always looking. But I'm like, dude, I don't know, man. I'm like, if we ever did something, it would have to be something that generated that generated revenue outside of just a Sunday gathering. Like I said, because I feel like gatherings, Sunday gatherings are the easiest thing we do, or weekend gatherings. So and this might be too spiritual, but I just literally feel the Lord saying, John, just focus on making disciples, on what I've called the church to do, and I will take care of your gathering places. And so it's like, same time that might change where there's a property or place that I'm like, this is it, y'all. Get your checkbooks ready. We're about to go on a building fund and and see this thing happen. So, but I just feel a piece right now of where we're at and what we're focusing on, and what the Lord's building is like. Focus on making disciples, and your places to gather and where you do all that stuff. I'll take care of.
Yeah, and you guys really leaned into the theater thing, especially in the early days, right? Like, didn't you have you own the domain? What was it, like Church
Theater,
in the Theater?
churchinn.com. I mean, that was something that Mark Batterson did back in the early 2000s, because that's where they really grew. Yeah, we definitely did. And I think for us, it became, there were some people that were really, oh, they're a progressive church, or they're this, that, or the other thing, because they're in a theater. And so we not that we've backed off on that, but also too, I kind of feel like as we're coming up on year 8, it's just like I feel like we have a reputation, of like we're going to be about discipleship. We are diverse, and so I kind of feel like we're building more trust now, and so we're not just the cool little hip theater church that meets at Regal, but it's like now it's like no, it's like they're a church that is less about where they meet and the kind of people they're trying to raise and see God build.
So good.
So yeah.
So what made you guys want to originally reach out to ChurchCandy?
And I feel like so social media, man, I feel like for many years with our church has always been a thorn in my flesh, right? I feel like we've done it okay, but it was kind of no intentionality, right? It was like, well, we think and maybe this, and we saw this on what's the other guy named Brady stickers page or something. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
we saw this on there and this, that, the other thing. So it was all just like throwing stuff at the wall, right? And just hoping some of it worked. And we had tried a company. I think we tried two other companies, right? And they were train wrecks, man. Like I mean, and I'm not going to say who they are, but
You
it
can
was
tell me once we stop recording.
okay, so stop the recording. And really, it was just the customer service. Like it was like promises that wouldn't be kept. They would ghost you for a week. Wouldn't give you any updates on how stuff was going, and it was literally like, okay, I'm paying $5,000 or $6,000 for this stuff, and so you just feel like you're throwing it down the toilet. So, but I had always been like, okay, I know we probably need to get a little more intentional with this. And so I don't remember where I saw ChurchCandy for the first time, but I was like, hey, you know what? We'll give it a shot. So we did the call, we waited, or we kind of did the the discovery call, I think you guys call it. And so we did that and was like cool, and kind of saw how much it would cost. And then but we waited, and then last year before Easter 2024, I think like March, I was like, okay, let's go ahead and get some intentionality here, and get people who actually know what they're doing to oversee these sorts of things for us. So it was I think February, March of last year.
And then throughout the last, 18 months or so, what kind of growth have you guys seen since using ChurchCandy?
About 10%, but also too, what I have realized in with churches in the 757 is all of the bigger churches they never saw exponential growth. So all of the bigger churches where we're at are over 20 years old, right? And I think because we are such a transient area, it's like you have to grow 5 to 7%, 7 to 10% each year, because you're going to have people leave, not because they want to, but because they're being sent. And then you're going to have people come. And so I'm like, man, if we can grow 10% year over year and just work and just work the math, be faithful to make disciples, and just do that, I'm like, to me, that's a huge win, just because of the simple transiency. But it's funny because when I think I've got 4 active people right now that are
That you
using
referred,
ChurchCandy
yeah.
that I have referred. And you know whenever people ask me about it, they always, the first, well, how much does it cost, and what kind of results are you getting? And I'm like, that's so Western thinking, right? Like, how much? And I get it, but also too, I don't think people understand the cost of people not knowing your church exists. So people are like, well, how much does it cost? I'm like, I don't know if you
Yeah.
want me to say it costs $500 per month. You guys run the ads. I'm like, what a small price to pay for people in your city knowing your church exists. Because the bigger cost is no one knows you exist, or a small amount of people know you exist, right? So I'm like, what a small price to pay for people to be targeted, it's for people to intentionally know you're there. And then, the question, well, how many people are planning visits? I'm like, I wouldn't plan a visit. If I saw an ad for a church, I'm not planning a visit.
I'm not giving them my
I'm
number
not
and email.
giving them my number and my email and this, that, and the other thing. And to me, this might be a bad thought, but I don't just go by how many people plan visits. I go by how many first time guest cards we get and how did you find out about us? Instagram, Facebook, because so many people, they're not going to give you their info. But it's crazy. What we'll find is we will have people follow us on Instagram. And there's something in there you can say follow us from the ads you're doing, right? And so I just think, man, like people have to understand, like, what cost do you want to pay? Do you want the cost of people not knowing you're there, or do you want to let people run your social that actually know what they're doing, and the customer service? That's what I've been the most impressed with. Is the customer service, like how you guys have scaled and how you guys have been able to handle so many churches while still keeping that personal touch of like, hey, here's how your ads are doing. Hey, you can check in, you can make an appointment, and you can talk to us, and you can update things. That to me, I just think has been the most impressive thing that I'm just like, this is legit.
I love to hear that, man.
Yeah.
Our team's gonna love that
well,
clip.
Well, it's definitely true because, like I said, I've tried a couple other companies and I don't know what happened to them, but yeah. I mean that's the part to me, because I just think in this culture where everything is so fake, I think it's like being able to talk to a real person that's like managing your ads, and then they can go in to see how things are going and say, hey, I would recommend. They even make recommendations where they're like, hey, you might want to do a selfie video that focuses on this or focuses on that, And so I just appreciate it. It's just not like we're doing it by ourselves or having to come up with creative things by ourselves. Like, hey, these churches have done this and you can try this. And I feel like you're always, say, hey, do a coffee with the pastor ad, or, like just do some creative things to try to get people in the door.
Yeah. I mean, we have an advantage because we've worked with over 1,000 churches. So that's a lot of data that we can look at and be like, okay, here's some things that work really well. Let's try this. And so that's something that is really cool about what we do. And so for you guys, you're so focused heavily on discipleship, and it's not just like service level. Oh, these many people showed up. Do you have any specific testimonies of people that found your church from ChurchCandy ads, like they found you from the social media ads?
Yeah.
And God's just done something really cool.
I think about a guy named Matt. So he came to the Hampton launch whenever we launched back in March. Literally just got out of rehab, and he saw the ad, lived about a mile away from the church, and he was like, I want to go check this place out. He came, he got saved, he accepted Christ, and we were talking with him afterwards, and he said that he's been diagnosed where when he gets in larger crowds, he basically gets crippling anxiety. And he said, but it was crazy. While I was here, I didn't feel none of that. He said, I felt a peace. He said, I felt loved, and he's battling addiction still, but it's people like him that I just think about that, he would have never found us, if we were running that, and so it's stories like that just, it's just like, man, like you never know, like we actually had one other person, that they live in Gloucester, which is about 40 minutes away from us, from where we have church in Hampton. And she said, we just moved from San Diego. She said, I literally was praying, Lord, I need to find a church. She said she opened the Facebook app. The first thing she saw was Lifehouse Hampton. And she said, I'm going to go and try that place out. It's on Saturdays. I don't have work on Saturdays. I work on Sundays. This would be perfect for me. She came. Now she's involved. She rededicated her life to God. You know what I'm saying? It's stuff like that. Wow. Where we, to me, it's like partnering with the algorithm. We give it our 5 loaves and 2 fish, and then we say, Lord, bless the algorithm and let it get where it needs to go, the people it needs to go to, the timing and all of that. So that's what I kind of feel like it is, giving God something to work with. I mean, like, Lord, here.
If you had to guess, on average, how many new families or new guests are you guys seeing on a weekend?
So this is funny, right? So we this was actually really funny. So earlier this year, we were I think we were getting like between 15 and 18 first time guest, right? And I felt like we were doing a horrible job of following up. It was just like, and so what I said is I was like, okay, we're gonna pause the ads because it's like I feel like there's some things internally like we've got to get right. We can steward right. And as we were prepping for the Hampton launch, and so we paused the ads, and this is how to me it was like why Church Candy is impactful is because literally when the moment we paused the ads, the next month we saw literally half the guests that we would normally get, half. So I was, so it was like these definitely make a difference,
Yeah.
and I was about to say, but it was like, you I just don't think you know what you have until it's gone, and so that's when I was like, yeah, you know what, this we it's like, hey, let's go ahead and get these ads rolling, back. So
That's huge, man. I
yeah,
love it. I love it. Well, Pastor John, thank you. This has been incredible.
yeah, appreciate the opportunity.
Two things. Number one, if people wanted to get involved with soul shepherding,
Mm.
what would the best way for them to do that?
Um, I think it's soulshepherding.org.
Okay.
But also too, if they wanted to reach out personally, because I know sometimes it can be, they want to hear how something has impacted somebody maybe before they try it, or maybe like, where do you think? Because I'm actually a spiritual director with them now. I went through their training program, and got certified with them, and so I'm actually part-time on staff with them, helping them to kind of help pastors steward their own souls. So they can reach out to me personally, or if they kind of want to see more of an overview of what soul shepherding is, soulshepherding.org.
Yeah. And then that
Yeah.
was the second thing is how can they reach out to you personally if they wanted to connect?
Yeah. Email john@lifehouse757.com. My cell phone number. I'm just kidding. I mean, if it's 757-267-4667, that's the safe number. Uh, but also do Stuttering Pastor on Instagram. So they can reach out to me there.
Awesome. I love it. We'll put
Yeah.
all that info below. Thanks for joining us. And
Yeah.
guys, thank you for watching. That's going to do it for this episode.
Amen. Thanks, brother.